The morning sun was already high in the sky, but where Elena sat with her little granddaughter Maya, it felt like the world had forgotten them completely. The tall buildings around them blocked out most of the light, leaving them in a cold shadow that seemed to match how invisible they had become to everyone walking by. Elena pulled the thin blanket tighter around both of them. It was an old blanket, faded from blue to a grayish color, with small holes that let the cold air sneak through. She had found it behind a restaurant 3 days ago, and it was the only thing keeping them somewhat warm on the hard concrete. Maya was only 6 years old, but she had learned not to ask for much anymore. Her small hands were tucked under the blanket, and her big brown eyes watched the people walking past them like they were watching a movie. Sometimes she would see other children her age holding their parents' hands, carrying colorful backpacks, or eating snacks, and she would wonder what it felt like to be them. The cardboard sign in front of them was simple. Elena had written it with a pen she found on the street. The words were shaky because her hands hurt most of the time now, but they were clear enough to read, "Please help. We are hungry." She wasn't good with fancy words or long explanations. She just told the truth. For 3 whole days, they had been sitting in this same spot. Elena had chosen it because she thought people going to work in the big office building might have some extra money or food to share, but every morning, hundreds of people walked right past them like they weren't even there. Some people looked at them for a second, then quickly looked away. Others seemed to walk faster when they saw them sitting there. Maya's stomach made a loud rumbling sound, and Elena felt her heart break a little more. The last real meal they had was 2 days ago, when a kind woman from a food truck gave them some leftover rice and beans. Since then, they had only found a few crackers in a trash can and shared a bottle of water that someone left on a bench. Elena remembered when Maya used to laugh all the time. She was always singing little songs or asking a million questions about everything she saw. Now, Maya barely spoke at all. She just leaned against Elena's shoulder and watched the world go by like she was waiting for something good to happen, but didn't really believe it would anymore. The people walking to work all looked so busy and important. They wore nice clothes and carried briefcases or fancy bags. They talked on their phones about meetings and deadlines and weekend plans. Elena tried to catch their eyes sometimes, hoping someone would see that they were real people who needed help, not just part of the street furniture. Maya started crying softly, but it wasn't the loud crying of most 6-year-olds. It was quiet and sad, like she had learned that being loud didn't bring help. It just made people walk away faster. Elena stroked her granddaughter's hair and whispered, "It's okay, little one. Someone will help us soon. You'll see." But Elena wasn't sure she believed her own words anymore. She had tried everything she could think of. She had moved to different corners, tried different times of day, even changed the words on their sign. Nothing seemed to work. People in this big city seemed to have built walls around their hearts, and Elena didn't know how to break through them. The morning rush was getting busier now. More and more people streamed out of the subway station and hurried toward their offices. Elena watched a mother walking with her daughter, who looked about Maya's age. The little girl was skipping and laughing, carrying a bright pink lunchbox and wearing a clean school uniform. Elena imagined Maya in a school uniform, sitting in a classroom, raising her hand to answer questions and making friends during recess. Maya had been doing so well in school before everything changed. She loved reading and drawing pictures of flowers and butterflies. Her teacher always said she was one of the smartest kids in the class. But when Elena lost her job cleaning offices and they couldn't pay rent anymore, Maya had to stop going to school. Now, Elena worried that Maya was forgetting how to read, forgetting how to be a normal kid. A businessman in a dark suit walked very close to them, talking loudly on his phone about some important deal. For a moment, Elena thought he might stop, or at least acknowledge them. Instead, he stepped around their cardboard sign like it was just another piece of garbage on the sidewalk. Maya looked up at Elena, with those big, sad eyes that seemed to ask, "Why doesn't anyone see us?" Elena didn't have an answer. She pulled Maya closer and closed her own eyes for a moment, trying to remember better times. She thought about Maya's mother, her own daughter, who had worked so hard to give Maya a good life before the accident took her away. Elena had promised at the funeral that she would take care of Maya no matter what. But sitting here on the cold street feeling like failures, she wondered if she was breaking that promise. The city noise was getting louder, cars honking, construction work starting up, people talking and laughing as they headed to their comfortable jobs in warm offices. But somehow, Elena and Maya felt more alone than ever. They were surrounded by thousands of people. But it was like they existed in a different world, one where nobody could see them, or hear them, or care about what happened to them. Maya's crying got a little louder, and Elena felt tears starting in her own eyes. She had been strong for so long, trying to protect Maya from seeing how scared and hopeless she really felt. But sitting there in the shadow of all those tall buildings, with all those people rushing past them like they didn't exist, Elena began to wonder if anyone in this whole big city had any kindness left in their heart. Little did they know, someone was about to prove that kindness still existed in the world, and that sometimes all it takes is one person who chooses to listen when they hear a child crying. Dr. Rachel was having the worst morning she could remember. She had worked late into the night, trying to save a program that helped sick children get better food and medicine. For months, she had poured her heart into this project, believing it could help thousands of kids who needed it most. But this morning, her boss had called with terrible news. They were cutting all the money for her program. Walking down the busy street toward her office, Rachel felt like her whole world was falling apart. She had spent years studying to become a children's doctor, and she truly believed she could make a difference. Now it seemed like no one in charge really cared about helping the kids who needed help the most. Her mind was spinning with worry about all the children who wouldn't get the care they needed. Rachel was walking fast, her head down, completely lost in her thoughts about how unfair everything was. She barely noticed the people around her. The office workers rushing to meetings, the street vendors setting up their stands, the usual morning crowd that filled the sidewalks every day. She was planning what she would say to her team, how she would break the bad news to them that their dream project was over. Then something stopped her completely in her tracks. It was a sound that cut through all the city noise like a knife through butter. Rachel had heard this sound many times before in her work. It was the cry of a child who had given up hope. Not the loud, angry crying of a kid who wanted a toy or didn't want to go to bed. This was different. This was the quiet, broken crying of a child who had learned that crying doesn't always bring help. Rachel stopped walking and looked around, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. Her doctor training had taught her to notice things that other people might miss, especially when it came to children in trouble. The sound was soft, but it pulled at her heart in a way that made her forget all about her own problems. That's when she saw them. In the shadow of the tall office building, almost hidden from view, sat an older woman and a little girl. They were huddled together under a thin, worn-out blanket that looked like it had seen better days. The woman had gray, hair that needed washing, and clothes that were clean but old and patched in several places. But it was the little girl that made Rachel's heart stop. The child looked to be about 6 years old, the same age as many of Rachel's young patients. She had her face buried against the older woman's shoulder, and her small body was shaking with quiet sobs. Rachel could see a cardboard sign in front of them, written in shaky handwriting that simply asked for help because they were hungry. Rachel had walked past homeless people many times before. Living in a big city, you see it a lot, and sometimes you feel bad, but you're in a hurry or you don't know what to do, so you just keep walking. But something about this scene was different. Maybe it was because the little girl reminded her of her own patients, Or maybe it was because she could see how gently the older woman was holding the child, trying to comfort her, even though they were both clearly in trouble. For a moment, Rachel just stood there watching. She could see that other people were walking past them without stopping, just like she had been about to do. Some people glanced over but then quickly looked away, like they were embarrassed or didn't want to get involved. Others seemed to speed up when they noticed the woman and child, like they were afraid they might be asked for money. Rachel felt something change inside her chest. Here she was, upset about not being able to help children through her big fancy program, and right in front of her was a child who needed help right now, today, this very moment. Sometimes the universe has a funny way of showing you what really matters. She took a deep breath and walked slowly toward them, not wanting to scare them. The older woman looked up as Rachel approached, and Rachel could see a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. It was the look of someone who had been disappointed so many times but still couldn't help hoping that maybe, just maybe, this person would be different. Rachel crouched down so she was at their level, the way she always did with her young patients. She had learned that when you're talking to someone who feels small or scared, it helps to make yourself smaller too. Up close, she could see that. The little girl's cheeks were red from crying, and her clothes, while clean, were too big for her small frame. "Hello there," Rachel said softly, using the same gentle voice she used in her medical practice. "I'm Rachel. What's your name, sweetheart?" The little girl lifted her head slightly from the older woman's shoulder. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, but Rachel could see they were beautiful brown eyes that held a spark of curiosity, even through all the sadness. The child seemed surprised that someone was actually talking to her, really looking at her like she was a real person. "Maya," the little girl whispered, so quietly that Rachel had to lean in to hear her over the noise of the busy street. The older woman straightened up a bit, and Rachel could see her getting ready to defend herself or maybe to apologize for bothering people. Rachel had seen this before. People who were struggling often felt like they had to explain themselves or say sorry for existing, but Rachel wasn't here to judge them or make them feel worse. "I'm Elena," the older woman said carefully, "and this is my granddaughter Maya. We don't want to cause any trouble. We're just trying to get by." Rachel's heart broke a little more. She thought about her own comfortable apartment, her full refrigerator, her warm bed. She thought about all the times she had complained about small problems while these two were sitting outside with nothing, hoping someone would care enough to help them. "When did you last have something to eat?" Rachel asked, and there was no judgment in her voice at all, just genuine concern. Elena hesitated like she was embarrassed to admit how bad things really were. Rachel waited patiently, the way she did with her young patients when they were scared to tell her what was wrong. Finally, Elena spoke up. "We shared half a sandwich yesterday morning. A nice lady from the coffee shop gave it to us." Rachel felt a mix of anger and sadness wash over her. Not anger at Elena and Maya, but anger at a world where a 6-year-old child could go a whole day without eating while surrounded by people who had more than enough. At the same time, she felt something else, a determination to do something about it, right here and right now. "Wait right here," Rachel said firmly, standing up. "I'm going to get you both some food, and then we're going to figure out how to help you. I'll be back in just a few minutes, I promise." As Rachel walked toward the nearby cafe, she realized that her terrible morning had just become the beginning of something much more important than any work program. Sometimes life has a way of showing you exactly where you're supposed to be. Maya lifted her head a little higher and looked at Rachel with those big brown eyes that seemed too old for a 6-year-old face. There was something in the way this stranger spoke to her that felt different from all the other people who had walked past them. This woman wasn't looking through her like she was invisible. She was actually seeing Maya as a real person. "Maya," the little girl said again, this time a bit louder, though still barely above a whisper. She wiped her nose with the back of her small hand and glanced up at her grandmother Elena, as if asking permission to trust this new person. Elena was feeling all mixed up inside. Part of her wanted to believe that this woman might actually help them, but another part of her was scared. Too many times people had made promises they didn't keep. Too many times Elena had gotten her hopes up only to be disappointed. She didn't think she could handle another letdown, especially not in front of Maya. But there was something about Rachel that seemed genuine. The way she had knelt down to their level, the way she looked directly at them instead of staring at her phone or looking over their heads like most people did. Elena had learned to read people over the years, and this woman didn't seem like she was just trying to feel good about herself by talking to them for a few seconds before walking away. Rachel could see the doubt in Elena's eyes, and she understood it completely. In her work as a doctor, she had met many families who had been let down by the system, by people who made big promises but didn't follow through. Trust had to be earned, especially from people who had been hurt before. "I know you don't know me," Rachel said gently, "but I'm a doctor. I work with children, and I can see that Maya here is a very special little girl. I want to help you both, if you'll let me." Maya's eyes got a little brighter when she heard that Rachel was a doctor. She had always been curious about doctors and nurses, and before everything changed in their lives, she used to play pretend doctor with her dolls. She would wrap them in bandages made from old socks and pretend to give them medicine to make them feel better. "Are you really a doctor?" Maya asked, speaking more clearly now. It was the first full sentence she had said to a stranger in weeks. Rachel smiled, and it was a warm, genuine smile that reached all the way to her eyes. "I really am. I help sick children get better, and I make sure they have what they need to be healthy and strong." Elena felt some of the tension in her shoulders relax just a tiny bit. There was something about the way Rachel spoke to Maya that reminded Elena of the good teachers and doctors they had known before their world fell apart. People who actually cared about children and wanted to help them. "Wait right here," Rachel said, standing up but making sure to keep her voice calm and reassuring. "I'm going to go get you some food, and then we can talk about what else you need. I promise I'll be right back." As Rachel walked toward the nearby cafe, Elena held Maya a little tighter. She wanted to hope, but she was also preparing herself for the possibility that Rachel might just disappear like so many other people had. Maya, however, seemed to have a different feeling about it. "Grandma Elena," Maya whispered, "I think she's going to come back." "We'll see, little one," Elena replied. But deep down, she was starting to think Maya might be right. Rachel walked into the busy cafe with a purpose she hadn't felt in months. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods filled the air, and she realized how easy it was to take these simple pleasures for granted. Behind the counter, a young man was getting ready to help the next customer. "I need to order some food to go," Rachel said, "but I want enough for a woman and a little girl who haven't eaten in a while." The worker nodded and started taking her order. Rachel chose things that would be filling and comforting: fresh soup, warm sandwiches, fruit, and some cookies that looked like something a child would enjoy. She also grabbed a couple of bottles of juice and water. While she waited for the food, Rachel's mind was racing. She was thinking about Maya's sad eyes and Elena's tired face. She was thinking about all the children she treated in her practice, and how many of them went home to warm houses and full refrigerators. But mostly, she was thinking about how she had almost walked right past them, just like everyone else. When the food was ready, Rachel paid for it and walked back outside. She could see Elena and Maya still sitting in the same spot, and she noticed that Elena was watching for her return. When Elena spotted Rachel coming back with the bags of food, the relief on her face was unmistakable. "I told you she would come back," Maya said to her grandmother, and for the first time in days, there was a little bit of excitement in her voice. Rachel didn't just hand them the food and leave like Elena had expected. Instead, she sat down right there on the sidewalk, next to them, not caring that her nice work clothes might get dirty or that people walking by might stare at her. "I thought we could eat together," Rachel said, opening the first bag. The smell of warm soup and fresh bread made Maya's stomach growl loudly, which made all three of them smile. Maya's eyes went wide when she saw all the food. There were sandwiches wrapped in paper, containers of hot soup, fresh fruit, and even some chocolate chip cookies. It was more food than she had seen in one place since they had been living on the street. "Is this all for us?" Maya asked, hardly believing it. "Every bit of it," Rachel said, handing Maya a warm container of soup and a spoon. "And there's plenty for both of you." As Maya took her first sip of the soup, she closed her eyes and smiled. It was warm and creamy and tasted like the best thing she had ever eaten. Elena watched her granddaughter's face light up, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe things might be okay. But Rachel didn't stop there. As they ate, she asked Elena gentle questions about their situation. She learned about Maya's mother, about how Elena had been taking care of Maya since the accident, about the job Elena had lost and the apartment they had been forced to leave. Elena found herself telling Rachel things she hadn't told anyone else. There was something about the way Rachel listened, really listened, that made Elena feel like her story mattered. Rachel didn't interrupt or judge or give advice right away. She just listened and nodded and showed Elena that she cared about what had happened to them. Maya was eating steadily, savoring every bite, but she was also watching Rachel carefully. She liked how gentle Rachel was with her grandmother, how she didn't make Elena feel bad about their situation. Maya had seen other adults look at Elena with judgment or pity, but Rachel looked at her with respect. "You know," Rachel said as they finished eating, "I think Maya here is very lucky to have such a caring grandmother." Elena felt tears come to her eyes, but they were different tears than the ones she had been crying lately. These were tears of gratitude and relief. For so long she had felt like a failure, like she wasn't good enough to take care of Maya properly. But Rachel made her feel like she was doing something right, like her love for Maya mattered even when she couldn't provide everything Maya needed. As they sat there together on the sidewalk, something beautiful was beginning to happen. Other people walking by started to notice not just the homeless woman and child, but the well-dressed woman sitting with them, treating them like family. And that simple act of kindness was about to inspire something much bigger than any of them could have imagined. As Rachel sat there on the sidewalk with Elena and Maya, sharing their meal and listening to their story, something incredible started to happen around them. At first, it was just curious glances from people walking by. They weren't used to seeing a well-dressed woman sitting on the ground, talking and laughing with a homeless grandmother and her little granddaughter like they were old friends. Maya was finishing her sandwich when she noticed a man in a security uniform walking toward them. Elena tensed up immediately, pulling Maya closer. They had been asked to move along by security guards before, sometimes nicely, sometimes not so nicely. Elena was getting ready to gather their few belongings and find another spot. But this security guard, whose name was Tommy, had been watching Elena and Maya for 3 days from his post at the office building. Every morning, he saw them sitting there in the shadow, and every morning he felt bad that he couldn't do anything to help. His boss had told him not to let homeless people stay on the property, but seeing little Maya made him think of his own daughter at home. Now, watching Rachel sit with them and treat them with such kindness, Tommy felt something change in his heart. If this important-looking doctor lady could take time to care about them, maybe he could find a way to help too. Tommy approached slowly, and Rachel looked up at him with a smile. "Hi there," she said warmly, not moving from her spot on the ground. "I'm Tommy," he said, looking a bit nervous. "I work security here. I've been watching this little girl and her grandmother for a few days now, and He paused, reaching into his lunch bag. "I was saving this for my break, but I thought maybe Maya might like some crackers and a juice box." Maya's face lit up when Tommy crouched down and offered her the snacks. It wasn't much, but it was his lunch, something he had brought from home. Elena felt tears in her eyes again, but they were good tears. 2 strangers in one day had shown them kindness, when hundreds of others had walked past. "Thank you," Maya said quietly, accepting the crackers with both hands like they were something precious. Tommy stood up, feeling good about what he had done, but also thinking. "You know," he said to Rachel, "there's a little storage room in the basement of our building that's not being used right now. It's got heat and a bathroom. Maybe tonight if they needed somewhere safe to sleep." Rachel's heart warmed even more. This security guard, who probably didn't make a lot of money himself, was offering to risk his job to help Elena and Maya have a safe place to sleep. "That's very kind of you, Tommy. What do you think, Elena?" Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. A warm, safe place to sleep? Maya hadn't slept somewhere warm in over 3 weeks. "Are you sure it would be okay?" she asked Tommy, hardly daring to hope. "I'll make sure it's okay," Tommy said with determination. "Every child deserves a safe place to sleep." Word about what was happening started to spread in the way that word spreads in neighborhoods. Lisa, who ran the flower stand on the corner, had been watching the whole scene while she arranged her flowers for the day. She had noticed Elena and Maya before, but, like so many others, had felt unsure about how to help. But seeing Rachel and Tommy both step up to help made Lisa feel braver. She selected some of her prettiest flowers. Some were a day old and wouldn't sell as well, but they were still beautiful. She walked over to their little group, carrying a small bouquet of yellow and pink flowers. "Every little girl should have flowers," Lisa said with a big smile, handing the bouquet to Maya. "These are for you, sweetheart." Maya had never been given flowers before. She held them carefully, smelling their sweet scent and touching the soft petals. "They're so pretty," she whispered. "Thank you." Lisa felt her heart fill up with happiness. Such a simple gift. But Maya was looking at those flowers like they were the most beautiful things in the world. Lisa realized she had been missing out on chances to spread joy, and she didn't want to miss any more. By now, other people were starting to notice what was happening. A small crowd was beginning to form, but it wasn't the kind of crowd that made Elena nervous. These people were coming over because they wanted to help, not because they wanted to stare or judge. David, who worked at the coffee shop where Rachel had bought the food, came over during his break. He brought a thermos of hot coffee for Elena and some hot chocolate for Maya. "I saw you helping them," he said to Rachel, "and it made me want to help too." Then came Anna, who worked at the bookstore down the street. She had grabbed a few children's books that had gotten slightly damaged in shipping, but were still perfectly good to read. "I thought Maya might like some stories," she said, kneeling down to show Maya the colorful picture books. Maya's eyes grew wide with excitement. She had loved reading before everything changed in their lives, and she had missed books so much. "Can I really keep them?" she asked. "They're all yours," Anna said, and Maya hugged the books to her chest like they were treasures. More people kept coming. Carlos, who sold newspapers on the corner, brought over some blankets that a customer had left behind months ago. Mrs. Chen, who was walking her small dog, went home and came back with some of her grandson's outgrown clothes that looked like they would fit Maya perfectly. Rachel watched in amazement as the community came together around Elena and Maya. Each person who stopped to help made the next person feel braver about helping too. It was like watching kindness spread from person to person, growing bigger and stronger with each act of generosity. Maya was overwhelmed with all the attention and gifts, but in the best possible way. For weeks, she had felt invisible, like nobody cared whether she existed or not. Now, all these grown-ups were taking time out of their busy day to make sure she had what she needed. She was hugging her flowers and books, wearing a warm jacket that Mrs. Chen had brought, and smiling more than she had smiled in months. Elena was crying happy tears, watching her granddaughter be surrounded by so much love and kindness. All these people could have walked by, just like hundreds of others had done. But Rachel's example had shown them that it was okay to stop, okay to care, okay to help. I can't believe this is happening, Elena whispered to Rachel. Sometimes, Rachel replied, all it takes is one person to show others that caring is possible. Look around. There was always kindness in people's hearts. They just needed to see that it was safe to let it out. As the afternoon went on, the small gathering turned into something beautiful. Children from the nearby school had heard about Maya from their parents and brought toys and games to share. Adults brought food, warm clothes, and most importantly, their presence and attention. Maya was laughing and playing with some of the other children, showing them her new books and carefully arranging her flowers. Elena was talking with some of the adults, sharing her story and feeling heard and valued for the first time in months. But this was just the beginning. Rachel knew that food and flowers and a safe place to sleep for one night were wonderful, but Elena and Maya needed more than emergency help. They needed a real chance to rebuild their lives. And as she looked around at all these caring people who had come together, Rachel realized that maybe, just maybe, they had found something even more powerful than a community willing to help for one day. They had found a community ready to change how they saw and cared for their neighbors forever. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in soft colors of orange and pink. Maya had never noticed how beautiful the sunset could be when you weren't worried about where you would sleep that night or when you would eat next. She was sitting on the sidewalk, surrounded by her new books and carefully arranging her flowers, while Elena talked quietly with Rachel about what would happen next. Rachel had spent the afternoon making phone calls to everyone she knew who might be able to help. She called her friends at the hospital, people she knew who worked with housing programs, and even reached out to some organizations she had heard about but never contacted before. Each phone call was like planting a seed of hope. I think I've found something, Rachel said to Elena, holding her phone after finishing her latest call. There's a program that helps families who have lost their homes. They have an apartment that just became available, and they're willing to meet with you tomorrow morning. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. An apartment? A real home with walls and a door that locked and a kitchen where she could cook meals for Maya? It seemed too good to be true, but looking at all the kind people who had gathered around them that day, Elena was starting to believe that maybe good things could still happen. What about Maya's school? Elena asked, because even in her excitement, she was thinking about what was best for her granddaughter. Already taken care of, Rachel smiled. There's a really good elementary school just 3 blocks from the apartment. I spoke to the principal, and she's excited to meet Maya. She said they have a wonderful reading program that Maya would love. Maya looked up from her books when she heard them talking about school. She had missed school so much. The smell of crayons and paper, the feeling of learning new things, having friends to play with at recess. Can I really go back to school? She asked, her voice full of hope. You can, Rachel said, kneeling down to Maya's level. And I bet you're going to do amazing things there. But the story didn't end with just finding Elena and Maya a place to live. Something much bigger was happening in the community. Tommy, the security guard who had offered them his lunch, went home that night and couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. He told his wife about Rachel and how her kindness had inspired so many others to help. You know what? Tommy said to his wife as they were getting ready for bed. I want to do more than just help one family. I want to make sure this doesn't happen to other kids. The next week, Tommy started volunteering at a local shelter on his days off. He used his security training to help keep families safe, and he always made sure to have extra snacks in his pockets for any children who might be hungry. Other people from that day started volunteering too. Lisa from the flower stand, David from the coffee shop, and Anna from the bookstore. Rachel realized that her program at the hospital might have been canceled, but she had discovered something even more important. She started a new organization, not with fancy offices or big budgets, but with the group of people who had come together to help Elena and Maya. They called it Listen to the Crying, because it all started when Rachel heard Maya's quiet sobs and decided to listen instead of walking away. The organization was simple but powerful. They trained people in the community to recognize when families were in trouble and to know how to help. They created a network of volunteers who could provide immediate help, food, clothes, a safe place to stay, while working on longer-term solutions like housing and jobs. Elena surprised everyone, including herself, by becoming one of the most valuable volunteers. She had lived through homelessness, so she understood what families were going through in a way that others couldn't. She could talk to scared mothers and fathers and help them believe that things could get better. She could sit with children who were afraid and hungry and help them feel safe. "I know exactly how you feel," Elena would tell families she met through the program, "because I was sitting right where you are just a few months ago. But look at me now. Look at Maya now. Things can change, and there are people who want to, help you." Maya thrived in her new school. She made friends quickly, and her teachers were amazed at how smart and eager to learn she was. But Maya never forgot the lessons she learned during those hard weeks on the street. She started a project at school where students collected books and toys for children who didn't have homes, because she remembered how wonderful it felt when Anna gave her those books. "Every kid should have books to read," Maya told her class when she presented her project. "Books make you feel like you're not alone, even when you're scared." Maya's teacher was so impressed that she helped Maya expand the project to other schools in the district. Soon, children all over the city were collecting items for homeless families, and Maya became a little ambassador for kindness, speaking to classes about how important it is to help others. The building where Elena and Maya had sat for those 3 desperate days became a symbol of hope in the neighborhood. Someone painted a beautiful mural on the wall nearby, showing hands reaching out to help other hands. At the bottom, it said, "We see you, we hear you, we care." Rachel continued working as a doctor, but she never forgot the lesson that Maya and Elena had taught her. Every day before work, she would walk past the place where she first heard Maya crying, and she would remember that sometimes the most important work you can do is simply noticing when someone needs help and choosing to do something about it. The ripple effects continued to spread. People who heard the story were inspired to look more carefully at their own communities. They started noticing the homeless person at the bus stop, the family struggling to pay for groceries, the elderly neighbor who seemed lonely, and bit by bit, act by act, the community became a place where fewer people fell through the cracks. Years later, when Maya was in high school and volunteering at the same shelter where Tommy worked, she would tell new volunteers the story of how it all began. She would talk about the day when she thought nobody in the whole world cared about her and her grandmother, and how one doctor's decision to stop and listen changed everything. "It wasn't magic," Maya would say. "It was just one person who decided that we mattered." And that one choice started something that's still growing today. Elena, now in her 70s but still volunteering every week, would always add, "The most important thing to remember is that kindness is contagious. When you show someone compassion, they remember what it feels like, and they want to pass it on to someone else." And in that busy city where thousands of people rushed past each other every day, there was now a community of people who had learned to slow down, to listen, and to remember that everyone has a story worth hearing and a life worth protecting. It all started with the sound of a little girl crying and one person who chose to care.